So that's when we moved into the nurse's office where there was like a big industrial size scale thing there. And I hopped on and it read 184 kilograms, that's 406 pounds. And I was shocked. Like, how could have I got it so wrong? How could have I thought that I was 120 kilograms when I was actually 184 kilograms? Like, how do you get it that wrong? So I guess that was kind of the wake up point. But then from there, of course, the doctor then was like, well, we need to do tests. There has to be other issues here. And so, of course, I had to go get blood tests and do a whole bunch of other tests, like sleep tests and stuff. And it came back, I was pretty much nearly killing myself in my sleep every night.
That is Elle Goodall this week on the Do It For Yourself podcast. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode here on the Do It For Yourself podcast. This week, I have a highly anticipated guest and a highly anticipated interview that I am really, really looking forward to bringing to you. My guest this week on the podcast is Elle Goodall, and many of you would probably recognize Elle under her Instagram name, which is Elle's Journey to Good Health. And if you are a fan of triathlon and you watched the Ironman World Championships, then you are familiar with Elle's journey. But if you are not, and this is your first time hearing of Elle, Elle was someone who was significantly overweight, and Elle made a decision to go through and have a weight loss surgery, and then subsequently found her love for triathlon and has gone on to compete in Ironman triathlons multiple times. And Elle had the privilege and the honor of racing Kona, which is the Ironman World Championships, which takes place in Kona, Hawaii. And so today on the podcast, we get a chance to sit down and really dive deep into Elle's story, talk about where she was, where she came from, how she got to where she is today, and where she plans on taking this journey over the course of the next couple years. So it was an honor to get the chance to sit down with Elle, and I am so thankful. I said it to her multiple times at the end of the podcast, but I am just so thankful for the opportunity to share her story and for her to sit down with me, especially being as we are on such opposite ends of the time spectrum. So without further ado, let's get into this week's interview with Elle. All right, so in that case, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do this.
Let's do it. Elle, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I've been really, really looking forward to getting connected with you. And obviously, I guess it's probably no secret how I discovered your journey. I discovered your journey because you were all over the place when it came to the Ironman World Championships this year. And that was part of a program that Ironman had put together. And it was you and Marcus Cook. I don't know if there was anyone else who was in it, but it seemed like you two were the people who they really focused in on, and it was part of their tagline, anything is possible. So before we get into your story, you are a triathlete, you are competing in triathlon. So what is top of mind for you? What is your big focus right now? You were just telling me you have a huge bike ride to do tomorrow morning. So what are you really focused on right now?
Yeah, so Cairns Ironman is my next race, which is the beginning of June. So not too far away. I was actually going to do a 70.3 in 4 weeks' time. However, chatting with the coach, we're actually not going to do that anymore, just to give me a little bit more, I guess, rest time, I guess, in the lead up to Cairns, because I really want to do well in Cairns. So we've decided to take out the 70.3 and just really put a big focus on the full Ironman, which is coming up.
Wow, yeah, it's coming up. It's coming up quick, but I mean, 4 weeks' time for a 70.3 isn't too bad. How much time would have been between the 70.3 and then the full?
Only a couple of weeks. So that's sort of, it's what I did last year as well. I did Ironman Australia, the 70.3, and then I did Cairns full as well, and there was only like maybe two or 3 weeks between. So that's kind of why this time we've decided to hit it at a different approach and just go straight into the full Ironman and not worry about the 70.3 in front of it.
Last year then, you did Cairns Ironman in April, like this time of year, and then you turned around and you did Kona in October.
Yeah. So last year I did my first full Ironman, which was in December 2017. And then I did Cairns Ironman, which was June 2018. And then Kona, which was October 2018. So they were all really quite close to each other. And then I did the 70.3 in the middle there, in between Busselton Ironman and Cairns Ironman, and I was also hit by a car just after Busselton Ironman as well while I was out cycling on the road. So far and few between, I guess, to the strengths. So I'm pretty happy with how I've come out in the end.
And I would say you're not just happy with the racing that we were just discussing, but you've got to be happy with where you have come, both physically and mentally, from where you used to be, because you have not always been this fit and active person who is competing in multiple Ironman and 70.3 distance triathlons every season. So where did you start, and what was it like before triathlon for Elle?
Yeah, so 3 years ago, I guess, is when this kind of whole journey started. So I weighed 184 kilograms, which is about 406 pounds, I believe, at my heaviest. And, everyday living was a struggle for me back then, tying my own shoelaces. I couldn't, if I wanted to get down on the floor for any particular reason, I needed people to help me get back up. Even just walking 100 meters without having to stop and take a rest was a challenge. So, it wasn't great. It got to the point where, I was losing my life. I was losing my battle, and it was because of weight-related issues. It wasn't a pretty picture, and it wasn't looking great for me either, if I had have kept going down that same path that I was. Food addiction was a huge problem for me, and something that I really, really struggled with. So, that would have been about 3 years ago now, and sort of yeah, so happy I found triathlon. It's been something that has definitely saved my life.
Now, when it comes to the weight gain, I guess, was this kind of like a slow, gradual weight gain, or was there something that happened, some kind of event that kicked off the weight gain, like an injury where you couldn't move anymore? Or were you always just somebody who wasn't really super active and you just started eating and you were then eating a little bit more and eating a little bit more and eating a little bit more, and it was a slow gradual gain?
So I used to be a swimmer. I swam for Queensland here in Australia, and when I was younger, back at school, and then when I finished school, I kind of went off and did my own thing. So when I was at school, I was living with my mum and dad, and they were always mum was always very good with, what she cooked us for dinners. It was always quite a balanced meal. There was always vegetables, and we never really had takeaway, and once a week we would get it, but we never were allowed to have McDonald's or anything like that. If we had takeaway, it would be maybe fish and chips. So when I moved out of home, I was like, yes, I can eat as much McDonald's as I want. So it just became, it became my main meal. So it was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It was McDonald's. And I was working quite an active job at that point. So the weight gain, it was slowly happening, but very slowly. It wasn't until I got a job in an office where I wasn't moving at all, and I was sitting at a desk all day, that the weight gain really started to show. And I kind of just ignored it. I was comfortable at that point, That's when the food addiction, I feel like, really started to take a grip of my life. My partner, if he ever said to me, oh, maybe we shouldn't have McDonald's, I would just turn into this evil person, don't tell me that, because I want that. That's what I have. I have to have it. I have to have it. You need to give me that, because if you don't give me that, I will not be happy and will not be a lovely person to live with at all. So he kind of just gave up, and we would have McDonald's all the time, because there was no point in telling me that I shouldn't have it, because if I did, I'd just get really mad. And even to the point where my family they hint it, but my reaction wasn't pretty, so they kind of just stopped, because they knew how upset I would get when they told me. So yeah, I kind of knew that it was happening, but I just didn't know to the extent, and I'd stopped weighing myself. So, I didn't think that I had gotten that bad until that fatal day that I had to hop on a scale.
And so before we get to that fatal day where you have to step on a scale, while you were going through this, was it just specifically McDonald's that you kind of almost felt as if you were addicted to, or maybe you were, in fact, addicted to? And also, were you going to the doctor for anything, even for just a checkup, or if you were sick or anything like that? And did they express any concerns about this weight gain?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they did. But it wasn't. I usually try and avoid doctors at all costs back then. I just, oh no, I'm fine. I've just got a cold. I just need some cold and flu tablets, sort of thing.
That's me too. That's me too.
So I didn't, and when I did go to the doctors, they'd mention it, and they'd hint that maybe I needed to do something, but at that point it wasn't sort of out of control, I guess. It was happening, but it wasn't like super bad at that point. So yeah, sort of yeah, avoided doctors as much as I could. And I guess after the point where it was starting to get really bad, I literally hadn't seen a doctor up until the day that I went, and asked me to hop on the scale. I hadn't seen a doctor for maybe a whole year period. I guess it would have been maybe a year. I feel like it was even more, but maybe I went to the doctor and they just never questioned my weight. I don't know.
And I mean, the only reason I ask is because I used to, I'm actually still the same. I still dislike going to the doctor. I don't know if it's like a time thing or what. I haven't had a bad experience at the doctor by any means. It's just, I don't know. I just don't feel like going. I would rather take some cold and flu tablets, get over it, and just be done with it. But anyway, I used to go. And when I would go to the doctor, the woman would mention, hey, have you ever been concerned about your weight or anything like that? And I'm like, no, I haven't, and they wouldn't push it any further and say like, well, maybe you should, or have you ever thought about this or that? Like, it seemed like they never really tried to educate you on it, and they never really tried to help with it. It was almost like, okay, are you concerned? No, you're not. All right, well, that's fine. Here's whatever you came for. Go ahead, be on your merry way, and that's it. So I'm just trying to figure out if that was just me or if it's something that is maybe more of a common theme, and it seems like it's more common than I realized.
Yeah, I think you're right. Because, like I said, the times that I did go, they would mention it, they would ask, but I guess, though, they could probably sense that it was a subject that I didn't like to talk about as well, because I get very standoffish when it came to talking about my weight. Before, I get very, like, it's like my personality would change straight away, the second somebody mentioned weight or being bigger or anything like that. And I feel like they kind of would just stop the conversation. So, yeah, unless I pushed it. But, yeah, I think you might be right. And unless it's dire, like, obviously when that fatal day happened.
Right. And so let's get into that, because that was going to be my next question. And I want to hear about this fatal day and what really happened while you were at the doctor's office.
Yeah. So I had to go to the doctor's because I had to get a medical certificate for work. So I had to go see a doctor. And when I got there, the doctor was like, oh, well, we need to put you on the scale. We need to weigh you. We just need to see how much you weigh. I'm like, okay, righto. I hadn't weighed myself for quite some time, so I was kind of preparing myself. You know how you kind of prepare yourself for something that you're not sure what the result's going to be, but you got to prepare yourself for it because it's something you haven't done for a while. So I'm like, well, I think at the most I'll be 120 kilograms. I'm happy with that. I'm okay with that. And so I'd worked myself up to be, I'll be okay with that. And to me, that was like the maximum. I wasn't going to be any more than that. And then I hop on the scale and the scale read an error message. And I looked at my doctor and I'm like, what does that mean? And he goes, oh, you're too heavy for the scale. And I said, well, so what do the scales go to 110 kilos? And he's like, no, these scales go to 150 kilograms. And I'm like, so you're telling me that I'm heavier than 150 kilos? And he just kind of looked at me because he could tell that I was shocked. I'd estimated that at most I'd be maybe 120. How can I be over 150? And we didn't really know to the extent of how far over 150 I would actually be. So that's when we moved into the nurse's office where there was like a big industrial size scale thing there. And I hopped on and it read 184 kilograms, that's 406 pounds. And I was shocked. Like, how could have I got it so wrong? How could have I thought that I was 120 kilograms when I was actually 184 kilograms? Like, how do you get it that wrong? So I guess that was kind of the wake up point. But then from there, of course, the doctor then was like, well, we need to do tests. There has to be other issues here. And so, of course, I had to go get blood tests and do a whole bunch of other tests, like sleep tests and stuff. And it came back, I was pretty much nearly killing myself in my sleep every night. I would stop breathing to the point where the oxygen levels in my blood would drop to such low levels that I was nearly dead. So then they, tried to take my driver's license off me because they were concerned I was going to fall asleep at the wheel. And I had type 2 diabetes. They had to put me on a registry straight away. And it was just like downhill. Like, it's like I'd reached the downhill and I was going really, really fast to rock bottom. Like, that's kind of how it felt, because after discovering that I was a lot heavier than what I was, and then all of these other things that have come from that, from the tests and stuff, and then trying to take my driver's license, like, that's we rely on that, so it was horrible.
Now, was this all within the same doctor's visit? So once you got there, you got to the industrial scale, you see the 184, did they immediately rush you for other tests, or was this, okay, we need you to come back, and you had to come back like, the next week or the next day, or how did this all kind of work out?
Yeah, I had to come back. So he then gave me a script to go and get the blood tests done, and I had to come back because the tests were fasting. So I had to have nothing to eat for a certain period of time for the glucose tests and all that sort of thing. And they also had to do the tests over a couple of days as well, because there were so many tests that they had to do. So the blood test, I think it was like 3 visits that the blood test took, and then the sleep study, because I was in a remote town, they had to get it all flown out. So that took a little bit as well.
So over the course of the days or weeks, even months, after that first initial visit, as you were going through all of this testing, what was going through your head? And are you getting information as you go along? Or is it, okay, Elle, we need you to do this, and this, and then they hit you with all of the results at once?
Yeah, so they hit me with all of the results at once. So it was probably about 2 weeks from the initial, when I found out my weight, to when they told me the results. And then it was a couple of days after that they were trying to take my driver's license off me. And it was kind of like, so going from the in-between, so from where I got my weight to the point where before they told me the results, I was like, well, okay, I joined a gym. I signed up to a gym, and I'm like, well, obviously I need to lose weight. This isn't great. I'm going to join the gym. And so I joined the gym at like the next day after the scale thing. And I went once, and I walked on the treadmill for maybe half an hour. And on the treadmill, it said that I'd burnt 300 calories or something like that. So then I'm like, oh, well, okay, well, I can reward myself by going to McDonald's and getting dinner now. And I can get extra because, I've done well and I've worked these calories off. And you would think that I would be in a different frame of mind, at that point. But I just couldn't do it. But the funny thing is, I knew that I shouldn't be. And so I would get my meals, and I wouldn't even take it home. I would find a car park where nobody is going to see me, and I would sit in my car and eat the meals and then go and find a rubbish bin somewhere where no one's going to find it to put the rubbish. So it was like I hadn't even had the meal, and that's how bad it got, after the result. But you would think, like, you find out that you weigh so much more than what you thought. You would think that your eating habits would change, but I just couldn't. And it's almost like I ate even more, after finding out, because it just made me feel good when I was eating, it kind of just felt like nothing else mattered. So, yeah.
But that's a common misconception, and there's people that still do that. And quite honestly, I mean, to an extent, you probably still do the same thing. You have a massive, massive bike ride you're going to do tomorrow, and you're probably still going to reward yourself with a little something when you get done, but it's different, right? You completely kind of changed it around. So I think that that's very common. And for a lot of people, they look down at the treadmill or whatever piece of equipment that they might be on at the gym, and that thing tells you how many calories you've burned, and they're like, "Oh, great! I've burned this many calories, so I can go have X, Y, or Z," right? But what a lot of people don't understand is that those calorie counters on the machines, and even sometimes on our devices like Garmin's and Fitbits and everything else, they could be so inaccurate, like wildly, wildly inaccurate. And it's really, really hard to get an accurate number when it comes to calories burned. So I think if you're going off of just a calorie counter that's telling you how many calories you have burned, you could possibly be setting yourself up for some issues. And I think it's always better to track things that you know for certain, right? You know how many calories you've eaten, you can track that for sure. And you know if your clothes are fitting better and if your waist is getting smaller, you can track that 100% for sure. So I think it's always better to track those things. And I think it's also not necessarily such a bad thing to reward yourself with a special treat from time to time, if that's what you want to call it, especially after something like a massive bike ride or a race, because we're talking about a huge buildup. We're not just rewarding ourselves day in and day out for like little things, giving ourselves a pat on the back. I mean, we're talking about months and months of a buildup, and giving yourself a milkshake or a cheeseburger at the end of something like that. I don't necessarily think that that's such a bad thing. And I'm sure that there's reports and, articles and things that were written by someone who is way smarter than me from a medical background or in the medical field. But just me personally, I don't necessarily think that that's the absolute worst thing that you could do is maybe give yourself a treat every now and again. So, you have this somewhat unhealthy relationship with food and McDonald's in particular, it seems. And I actually just recently posted a podcast with a guy whose name was Will, and he was also from Australia, oddly enough, and he had a very unhealthy relationship with food, and he changed his entire mental outlook surrounding food. I guess that's the only way I could really describe it. And so before he even really started losing weight, he went through this complete mental transformation. So how did you get over this hump? Like, how did you get over this, oh, I was good today, so I can have McDonald's? And how did you restructure your relationship with food?
Yeah, I don't even feel like I can put my finger on. So I had weight loss surgery, which of course, weight loss surgery changes the amounts that you can eat in one sitting. It doesn't change how you feel about food and how much you want to eat. It doesn't change that. So I think for me, I really used that as the tool that it is. And I knew that after surgery, I had 4 weeks where I could only eat really liquids. So I knew that it takes about 4 weeks to try and break a habit. And so I kind of took that 4 weeks. It was bloody hard. It was so hard. Every day all I wanted was McDonald's. But mentally something inside, after surgery, something in my head was like, no, because surgery was so painful and I'd never ever want to go through that again. I just really tried my hardest to stick at it. And what I started to find out was that when I was craving McDonald's, if I just forced myself to eat something that I didn't necessarily want to eat and something healthy, like even just some celery or a cucumber, something healthy, but something that I don't mind eating. And I got myself a little bit full. All of a sudden, those urges that I got, those really big gravitations pulling me towards McDonald's would kind of slowly go away, because I wasn't hungry anymore. So, of course, it was when I was hungry and needed to eat something, for some reason, I just wanted McDonald's. That's all I ever wanted. So it was kind of just forcing myself to eat something else, and it might not be as satisfying as what McDonald's was, but it's food, and it's healthy food. And eventually those pulls that I was getting to want to eat that bad food would kind of just go away. And I learnt that. And it was hard. It was tough. It's tough when you really, really want something and you've got your mind set on it and you get something else and it's kind of like, well, that's not what I wanted. It sucks, but it works. It works. And still to this day, I still, every now and then I'll drive past McDonald's. I haven't had McDonald's since surgery, so 3 years ago now. 3 years it's been. I haven't touched it. I'm just so scared to fall back into that place. But every now and then I get the cravings, but I put it back to that. I'm like, no, I'll just go and eat something else and you'll be fine. And sure enough, the cravings go away as soon as I have something else to eat.
And what do you think really kind of powers that drive to say no, and what powered that drive to go through and even after surgery keep going and stay away from the McDonald's and making the healthier choice? Because you said it yourself, this isn't easy, it's hard. So what kept you going when it was so hard?
Yeah, so I think I've got a very close family, very, very close family. And going back to when I found out about everything, one of the hardest things for me to do was tell my family what was going on. And one of the hardest things was hearing how upset my family were about everything. And they knew it was bad. They didn't know it was that bad. And hearing my father say to me that, please do something about this because they shouldn't be burying me. It should be the other way around. Like that really struck something inside. And I'm like, no, I have to do something. I have to win this battle because I can't. I love my life. I love my family. And so I think that was always in the back of my head, and even going through Kona, which I'll talk a bit more about soon, there were times where I nearly gave up, but I had my mum and dad in my head, and, I really think that that's sort of what pushes me to kind of not just to give up, to keep going. I don't want to go back to where I was. I don't want to be to the point where my family think that they're going to have to bury me soon because of my weight. I don't want that. That's not the life that I want to live, and that's not me. I don't feel like that was me. I feel like I kind of just lost myself for such a big period of time, and I'd finally got myself back. There was no way that I was going to go back there again.
And so post-surgery, I'm assuming you get back into the gym and you're trying to start losing some weight. Did you have a personal trainer that you were working with that was helping you along the way? Did you have a nutritionist or anything like that was helping? Or were you really just trying to do this on your own? And where were you getting your information from?
Yeah, so I didn't, not straight out of after surgery, I was just kind of doing it myself. I didn't join it. I didn't go back to the gym. I never felt comfortable at the gym, so I just refused. I'm like, nah, everything is going to be outside. I bought myself a stand-up paddleboard. I didn't really know triathlon was going to be kind of part of my journey at that point. And no, I didn't even have a nutritionist. I kind of just taught myself. I jumped online and I started to really teach myself about food and, what's healthy. I actually went on to an all raw diet. Again, it was all my own doing, just watching YouTube videos and all that sort of stuff. I kind of just learnt about it as I was going, from the internet really. And then I would go out to we had a lake, the local lake. I'd go out there and I'd do some stand-up paddling and some walking and that sort of stuff. And that's sort of when I found triathlon. The local triathlon group were out there swimming, and I'm like, well, I used to be a swimmer. I'd love to do a triathlon. And one of the ladies there kind of said, well, you can do a triathlon. Absolutely, you can do it. So she kind of then gave me a bit of a program and spoke a little bit about triathlon and Ironman and that sort of stuff, which was where the thought of Kona first popped into my head, I guess. She kind of just gave me she didn't, I didn't do groups or anything like that. She kind of just wrote it down and I would go off and do it myself, a little plan. So, yeah, my first triathlon, I did it. I would have been about 160 kilograms. I don't know what that is in pounds, but, it's still quite heavy. And pretty much the whole way through, I kind of just had a plan that was written down for me, and I would just go out and do it.
And so that's about 350 pounds or so. And that means you've still lost a considerable amount of weight when you go to do your first triathlon. And I'm assuming that you didn't go straight to this longer distance. So did you start with like a sprint or an Olympic? What was the distance on your first race?
Yeah, so my first ever triathlon was an enticer distance. So like your shortest, like it's like your kids one.
Yeah.
And then I only did one of that distance, and then I stepped it up within 2 weeks. I think the next one was to a sprint distance.
Okay.
And then I did, I think maybe one other sprint distance, and then I stepped it up to a Olympic distance.
And this is all within like the same season?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I did maybe two Olympic distances, I think. And then I'm like, well, I'm going to do a 70.3. So did a 70.3, and then I finished that, and I'm like, righto, well, 6 months time, literally 6 months from doing a 70.3, I had my eyes set on my first full Ironman. So in 6 months, I went from 70.3 to full Ironman. And then, that's when I did the 2 and then Kona.
And so over that time frame, when you did your first one at 160 kilos, about 350 pounds or so, from that point up until your first Ironman, how much weight did you lose in that time frame?
Just in that point in time, well, it would have been probably 100 kilos. So 100 kilograms just in that time frame.
Just in that time frame.
Yeah.
Wow. So you went from 184 kilos to about 84 kilos. That's a difference of 100 kilos, which is about 220 pounds. And you had lost a little bit of weight like before you did your first triathlon. So in total, you have lost over 220 pounds.
Yeah, I've lost 120 kilos in total.
Which is almost 265 pounds. And so is this all from training for your triathlons? Because when you're training for an Ironman, you're doing some really, really long hours and some long sessions. But would you say that you have also now restructured your relationship with food and you no longer have this food addiction to McDonald's? And so it's kind of both of those things that have been helping you.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. Obviously diet is probably the biggest part of any weight loss. It's the biggest part, 100% the biggest part. So I completely changed my way of eating. I went from McDonald's 3 times a day. And when I say 3 times a day, so one meal, I would be 3 large double quarter pounder meals in one sitting. Plus an extra thing of fries as well. So that would be one meal for me, and I would do that 3 times a day. So it was a lot of food.
That's a lot of food. That's a lot of food.
So when you think about it, just taking that away and then putting a healthy meal in place, and obviously portion is nowhere near that much, that's just in itself is gonna, it's gonna change everything. But then you add in, Ironman training on top of that and triathlon, and it's like a whole nother world.
Absolutely. And so when you first started, you had this little idea in the back of your head, let's say, this little glimmer of hope that one day you maybe could race Kona. And so how did that opportunity come about, and how did you get that chance to race Kona?
Yeah, so I back in the very beginning, before I'd even done a triathlon, I was like, Kona, these people, they were all talking about it. And I really wanted to know more about it. And so I kind of got online and had a look, and I'm like, wow, that's like the pinnacle. Yeah, I'm going to go there one day. Anyway, I, of course, started doing triathlon and did my first half Ironman, and Ironman kind of started following my story a little bit. On the sidelines, I had no idea, of course my social media was quite, was getting out there. And after my first 70.3, a lot of the local news companies really took my story and ran with it. So, and it turned out to be international. So like my uncle was in Spain, and he rang me one day and he's like, do you know that I was listening to the news here this morning, and all of a sudden this voice came on that was an Aussie, and I knew the voice, and I look over and you're on the news in Spain. And it was just crazy, like it was spread everywhere, my story. So, and I'd only done a 70.3 at that point. And so Ironman, that's kind of, they noticed me from that point. And I'd said that, right, well, I've done a 70.3 now, it's time to do a full Ironman. So Ironman got in contact with me just before I did my full Ironman and said that they would love to have me as part of Women for Tri to, as part of their documentary that they do for Ironman Western Australia. And they asked if I could speak at a couple of the local schools and, do a lot with the volunteers, which I was absolutely so grateful that I could work with the volunteers. And I guess in a sense, I helped inspire a couple of them as well. So they did that documentary and I was one of the athletes that they'd featured in that. And then they followed me to Cairns Ironman, which was just after that, after being hit by a car and my bike was written off and it was, horrible times, but I backed it up and I did Cairns Ironman just after that. So after Cairns Ironman, I got a phone call from Ironman saying, look, can you come into town? We want to do an interview with you. And they told me it was for Women for Try. And I'm like, yeah, okay, no worries. It's kind of like routine, right? I've done a few of these Women for Try interviews, and so it was just something that I kind of felt like I knew. And I get there, and the routine it just starts. The interview starts. There's cameras everywhere, and I'm just chatting. One of the guys from Ironman was there, and he asked me a couple of questions, and I went over my story, and then he asked the question. So tell me, he said, I like to do a bit of play on words and I really want to know what the word Kona means to you. And I'm like, not a strange question because I've put it out there so many times how much of a dream Kona was to me. I'd named my bike Kona before I even knew that I was going to be going there. My new bike after getting hit by a car, I'd named it Kona because, the goal was that I would one day ride my bike in Kona. And I told him how much it meant to me, and, got a bit emotional and a bit excited and, and I kind of said, one day I will go to Kona. And then the weirdest thing happened and he's just like, he told the cameraman to keep the cameras rolling, but he walked out of the room. And I'm sitting there like, what is going on? And he walks back into the room with this plaque in his hand, but it was facing him, so I couldn't see what was on it. And I'm like, well, this is weird. What is he doing? And then he starts to talk to me about how each year for Kona they get an ambassador, and that ambassador gets flown to Hawaii, and they race in Kona at Ironman World Championships. And I'm at that point, you can see in the video that they did, my breathing starts to really get deep and like very heavy, and I kind of had a hunch that something was up. And then he turned the plaque around and it had my name on it, and he told me that I was going to Kona, and I just went numb. I felt like I was numb. I couldn't believe it. And I kept saying to him, I'm like, are you serious? Is this a joke? Are you serious? He actually pinched me, and he's like, did you feel that? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, it's real. You're going to Kona. So, yeah, that's how that happened.
And so you had this amazing journey to get to Kona, and you had this amazing day, and it probably wasn't even just that day. It was probably just an overall amazing trip to Kona. And we don't have to go through your entire trip or even your entire race there, because I know that we have limited time, and there's probably so many things that we could talk about just based on your trip alone. But what would you say your top 1 to 3 memories were from this trip to Kona?
Number 1 would be crossing the finish line. 100% crossing the finish line. Number 2 would be stepping off the aeroplane into Kona. It's very surreal experience. You just kind of feel you just feel the energy of the island. And number 3 would be standing on the cliffs while the waves are just roaring and smashing up against the rocks, the lava rocks, and it's like huge splash. Like, it's just insane, the power of the ocean. Like, it's just incredible. But the roar, the noise that it makes when it's happening, it's just like it goes through your whole body. It's just amazing. So yeah, they'd probably be my top few favorite experiences from Kona, I'd say.
And now I know that because I was following you through this journey and following you through things that were going on before, during, and kind of after, as you were getting ready for Ironman and as you were even down there in Kona, you had some situations that were not so great. And this was such an exciting time for you. And it was almost as if people were raining on your parade. And people were making comments that you didn't qualify, so you didn't really, quote unquote, make it to Kona. And there were some other situations that were going on. So how did how did that make you feel? You're reaching this dream and you're getting to do this thing that you've really wanted to do. And now you have these people who are being just really rude. Like, how did that make you feel when you're sitting down there, you're pursuing this dream that you have wanted for so long?
Yeah, there were times where I would sit and just cry because I felt like, I'm like, well, maybe I don't deserve this, maybe because I didn't qualify, maybe I don't deserve to be here, maybe they're right. And it sucked, because I was getting so much of it, and not just from just random people. There were people who I'd followed and kind of looked up to a bit as well, and it's like I just I don't understand why you guys know who I am and what I've done, and I don't understand why you would be thinking like that, or why are you saying this? Like, I'm so excited about this, but I kind of felt like I had to kind of play down my excitement a little bit because I felt like I was offending people, I guess, and it sucked. It really did. It was really emotional for me and hard because I just wanted I wanted to scream it from rooftops, but I felt like I couldn't. I had to kind of just be mediocre about it because, yeah.
But that changed. I mean, you weren't mediocre about it. And I feel like I saw a post or a video that was from you, and it was kind of like a turning point for you. And you came to the realization, I guess, you could say, that not just because just because you didn't qualify doesn't mean you didn't do a ton of work to get there, and a ton of work not just to get to Kona, but even just to get to where you are today. So you did have a little bit of a downplay, but then I feel like you came to the realization that, you did deserve to be there. And this is something that you worked really, really hard to be there for. And in some aspects, you may even say that you've done more than someone who qualified, because you've done speaking engagements and you've helped people and you've lost this incredible amount of weight. So you did kind of come to this realization at least a little bit, right?
Yeah, I did, but I felt like I was dragged back down quite a few times. Like, it was very up and down. I would go up and I'd be like, you know what? No, yeah, I do. I do deserve this. 100% I deserve this. Look how far I've come. Look, look at what I've done. But then something would happen, or I'd get a message. Social media, it can be horrible. It can be horrible.
Yes, it can. It can be horrible, but it can be amazing too. Like, we got connected through social media, and we're doing a podcast, and we're sharing your amazing story, and that all happened through social media. But yes, it can be so horrible at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I was experiencing some bad times, but then it wasn't just that. Like, when I was in Kona, I went into one of the tents, and I went to purchase one of the singlets that they were selling, which was, Kona 2018. And the guy, and they had like these special edition bags, like shopping bags, to put your purchases in. And I asked him if I could have one, and he's like, these are for athletes, sorry. And I was like, looked at my friend and I'm like, do I not look like an athlete? And so it was one thing after the other, you know, like it was the qualifying thing. And then it was the fact that maybe I didn't look like an athlete and this guy just thought that I was just there to watch, and that upset me a little bit. And so it was very up and down the whole time. But I was also getting messages on social media the whole way through as well. You know, I lost a couple of followers because they were just being really nasty, and I just asked them if they could unfollow me, please. I'm like, look, can you just not follow me? Because it's just better. If you don't like or agree with what is going on, then why just unfollow me and don't bother. Like, don't bother. It doesn't faze me. I don't care, you know. I'm not. Yeah.
So now that you have done Kona, you've had this massive amount of weight loss. What keeps you going? What keeps you pushing forward? What keeps you motivated day in and day out, especially in triathlon and putting in very long hours to the training and getting up early? Like, what keeps you going, Elle?
You know, I won't be the first to admit that there are definitely days that I don't want to. There are days that I just don't want to get up early and I don't want to hop on the bike for 4 or 5 hours. I don't want to do that. But I think for me, and especially after Kona, you know what? After I raced Kona and I got back to Australia, I was like, well, nothing is ever going to beat that. No race is ever going to beat that. It's just not. What's the point now? You know? And it was very tough. It was very tough for quite a couple of months after Kona to kind of, and it's true. It's a true thing. It's a real thing. The whole post-race blues or post-race depression. It's so true. And especially after Kona, which is such a huge event, such a hype, and it was my pinnacle, you know. So I really had to try and refocus myself, and I then decided that, well, I want to go back to Kona. I want to go back and I want to try and qualify. So that's kind of my goal. I've got a goal now and I've got to push. So all of a sudden it's a drive again because I've got this new goal. And I think that's the key is it's always having a goal, you know, an ultimate goal, something that seems like it might be unrealistic. But something to drive you towards it, I guess. And so my ultimate goal is to go back to Kona and to qualify. And to do that, I need to race. So, yeah, I've given myself four years and I'm gonna go back to Kona.
And are you working with a coach right now?
I am, yeah. So Emma Quinn from T0 Multisports is my coach. And yeah, she never doubts what I say, because she kind of just knows that I tend to do everything I say I'm going to do. So she's just like, okay, if that is what you want to do, then let's work towards it. So.
And so the way that I really like to wrap up the show is that I like to ask my guest to take a step back and go back in time before the story that they just told. And so go back to the Elle that was, 184 kilos, or even to the Elle that was still sitting at about 160 kilos before doing that first triathlon. And think back to that time. Think back to what it was like to get started. And so what I'm really asking for is a piece of advice for someone who is in that position, but they have not taken that first step like you took. They did not take that step to get the weight loss surgery. They did not take that step to start that business that they've wanted to start. They did not take that step to do the first triathlon or to even go over and talk to the group doing the swim at the lake. They haven't taken that first step yet for a multitude of reasons. So what can you say to that person that might help get them going?
Well, that's That's a good one. It would probably be, I mean, the cliche, anything is possible. If you don't beat your fears, if you don't know, what would the word be? If you don't beat your fears, if you don't conquer your fears, you'll never know what you're capable of. And, nothing epic happens by sitting in your comfort zone. To do something epic, you really need to go outside of what your usual is and try something different. And I guarantee if you do that, the results will be epic.
So, Elle, I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much for coming on and for staying up late. I don't know if we covered it, but we are on opposite ends of the spectrum right now. So it's actually 8:30 in the morning for me, but it is now 10:30 at night on the same day for you. So you are into the future and you are getting ready to go to bed. So I want to say thank you for staying up late, especially with such a big workout tomorrow. And I also want to say thank you for being so open and sharing your story and giving us the details of what it was like while you were going through this journey. So thank you so much for both of those things. And I really, really had such a great conversation with you today.
Yeah, no worries, not a problem. I always love sharing my story and hopefully being able to inspire others.
And so do me a favor, just really quick, give me where people can find you and your social media handles. I know you mentioned you have Instagram, so just really quick, can you share those with us and then we will be signing off?
Yeah, so it's Instagram is Elle's Journey to Good Health with underscores in between each word. And Facebook is Elle's Journey to Good Health with no underscores. And YouTube is just Elle's Journey to Good Health as well with no underscores also.
All right, Elle. Well, thank you so much again. It's time to get to bed. I know you have a big training day tomorrow, so we will keep in touch. And just one last time, thank you.
No, not a problem.
So that is my interview with Elle. Elle's Journey to Good Health. How did that hit you? How's that sitting with you? How did that make you feel? Was there anything that you could relate to? Was there anything that surprised you about Elle's journey? For me, I was a little bit surprised that people were giving her so much kickback in regards to racing Kona. For those of you who are unaware, you have to typically qualify for a slot at the Kona World Championships. But Elle was presented with this opportunity through the Ironman Foundation. And, she had done speaking engagements and there was a lot that was involved in this. And, for people to just turn around and kind of rain on her parade and, really make this kind of like to downplay it, I think was just downright rude. But, there's just rude people out there nowadays. And I'm definitely glad that Elle overcame that and still completed the race and is now trying to qualify to go and race Kona via an Ironman event. So, like I said, I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as well. If you enjoyed this conversation or any of the conversations that we've had here on the podcast, please do me a favor. The biggest thing you can do to help me on this show is share it through word of mouth. Take a picture, screenshot, post it on your Instagram story, Facebook story, wherever it is. Share this show with someone who is going to enjoy it. That would help me more than you can imagine. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us this week. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone had a wonderful Memorial Day holiday. The weather was beautiful. Another weekend coming up here, so I hope you enjoy that one, and I will see you next week.